and Walt Shepard pushed shopping carts under the rising sun, each step a silent sacrifice to keep his ailing wife breathing. No headlines, no honors, just love, worn into his hands and held together by duty. When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett happened to stop and heard his quiet words, "If I quit, she won't survive," what followed wasn't charity, but a gentle correction of a long overdue debt. What did she uncover that changed everything? And why did one man's quiet struggle move a nation to tears? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. 6:30 a.m. in Dallas, Texas. While the city yawned and bankers sipped espresso behind glass towers, an old man moved alone across a cracked grocery parking lot, pushing steel carts that screeched louder than his knees. Walt Shepard, 90 years old, former Woodward airman, folded by time but never broken, wore a sun-bleached vest and a pair of boots so old the soles had outlived three-store managers. His breath was short, his steps uneven, but his mission never changed. Clear the lot before the customers came. Keep moving. Don't think about the pain. Behind the glass storefront, teenagers scrolled on phones, sipping energy drinks, while Walt wrestled rows of carts twice his weight, metal scraping concrete like distant gunfire from a war no one remembered. The sun hadn't yet crested the rooftops, but sweat already soaked through his back. Nobody looked twice. To them, he was a fixture, like the trash can or the dented soda machine, background noise in a city too loud to notice ghosts in daylight. Walt didn't need the job for pride. Pride had left him decades ago, sometime between the funeral of his only son and the first night he fed his wife canned soup with trembling hands. Elaine, his beloved, now lay trapped inside her own body, lungs ravaged by COPD, her days measured by the rhythm of a machine. She had forgotten how to write her name, but never forgot him. Each morning she clutched their wedding photo and tried to smile, as if the image alone could keep reality at bay. That's why Walt showed up every single day, no matter the storm, the pain, the humiliation. He wasn't working for a paycheck. He was working for oxygen, for dignity, for the last thread of love holding together a collapsing world. He wasn't just pushing carts, he was pushing back against a world that had already forgotten him. But that morning, the world pushed back harder, and someone else, someone unexpected, was about to witness it all. Jasmine Crockett had left Capitol Hill only 30 minutes earlier, but her mind still echoed with the testimony she had just absorbed. Elder abuse, underfunded Medicaid waivers, a 92-year-old woman denied an oxygen tank because a form was missing a second signature. Numbers, case files, bureaucracy, cold, lifeless facts. But beneath them were real people, real pain, and a silent war being waged against those too old or too poor to fight back. Jasmine, known for her sharp tongue and sharper sense of justice, had pushed hard in the hearing, demanding answers from stone-faced administrators. But now in the quiet of her car, she just wanted to exhale. She turned the corner into a strip mall in South Dallas. Nothing fancy, just a family-saver market wedged between a payday loan shop and a shuttered laundromat. She wasn't there for politics. She needed a pair of AA batteries for her digital assistant and maybe a bottle of water. That's it. In, outside, done. She parked by the faded red curb, half her mind still flipping through mental policy briefs, the other just aching for silence. But before she could even turn off the ignition, something caught her eye. A sudden jerk of movement, a stiff gesture just beyond the windshield. A figure, older, slumped forward, pushing something, her gaze sharpened. 10 feet from her, in the center of the cracked asphalt lot, an elderly man was dragging a tangle of shopping carts with both hands, the metal clanging like distant drums. He wore a name tag on a wrinkled vest and a ball cap that looked decades old. His face was gaunt but focused, hands trembling slightly as he tried to line up the carts. Each step looked like it cost him something. And then the voice came, shrill, arrogant, unmistakably young. "Again?" it snapped, sharp enough to make even the pigeons flutter. "What is this? Your third warning this month. These carts are all over the place." Jasmine's head turned instinctively. A young store manager, maybe early 30s, stalked across the pavement, his mouth curled in irritation. He waved a clipboard in one hand like a judge with a gavel. You can't keep slowing down the morning shift like this. I've got customers watching, and you look like you're about to fall over. The old man didn't say anything at first. He was still adjusting the front wheels of the cart row, one hand on his knee as if bracing against the whole weight of the morning. Jasmine's eyes narrowed as the manager stepped in closer. Too close. Look, he snapped, louder now. If you can't handle it, maybe it's time you packed it up and stayed home. This isn't charity. We need speed out here. Jasmine's breath caught. Her fingers, still on the steering wheel, tensed. The old man straightened slowly, not defiantly, but with the exhausted pride of someone who's had to answer insults with silence for far too long. His voice came out low, but it carried with strange, unnerving clarity. If I quit, he said, eyes not even meeting the manager's, who's going to pay for my wife's oxygen? No anger, just fact, just heartbreak wrapped in routine. Jasmine felt something in her chest collapse. She stepped out of her car, slow but deliberate. No flash, no urgency. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached, each step measuring the weight of what she'd just heard. She didn't need context. She didn't need a backstory. She had seen enough in Congress, in courtrooms, and in communities to know exactly what was happening. The man was working because the system had failed him, and now a boy in a branded polo shirt had the audacity to humiliate him in public because the cart line was crooked. She paused halfway across the lot, arms still at her sides. Her phone slid from her pocket with silent precision. One tap, then another. A quick photo of the manager's face, his name tag, his stance, his smirk. Evidence, not for court, but for memory, for accountability, for the principle of the thing. The manager didn't even notice her. He was too busy muttering something about standards and dead weight. Jasmine said nothing, not yet. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flash credentials. This wasn't about headlines or heroism. It was about watching, witnessing, refusing to look away when so many others would have just kept walking. She looked at the old man again, at Walt. His hands had returned to the carts. He was trying to push them again, one wheel stuck sideways. His breathing was shallow, but he didn't stop. Didn't slow down, because he couldn't. Because every second wasted brought him closer to the question he feared most. What if the machine back home shut off while he was gone? This wasn't about honor. This was about survival. And Jasmine, standing there in the heat of a forgotten parking lot, knew with bone-deep certainty she had just walked into the most important moment of her entire day. She took one step forward, then another. She closed the distance in just a few strides, her heels clicking with quiet precision against the hot pavement. Walt was gripping the metal handle of the crooked cart like it was the only thing holding him upright. His shoulders heaved, not just from physical strain, but from the weight of humiliation. Jasmine stopped beside him, adjusted her jacket, and bent slightly so her words didn't cut through the air like commands, but invitations. "Sir," she said, her voice low but unwavering, "may I help you with these?" It wasn't performative. It wasn't pity. It was presence. Intentional, undeniable. Walt looked at her, blinking into the sun. He scanned her face, the subtle lines of concern, the calm stillness that never begged for approval. His reply came like gravel under tired boots. "You don't need to feel sorry for me, miss. I'm not a charity case." He didn't say it with anger. He said it with exhaustion, with decades of learning to expect nothing from anyone who offered anything. Jasmine's lips curled into a slight smile, one forged not from sympathy but from shared experience. She nodded, slow and sure, eyes locked onto his. "It's not pity," she said. "It's respect." Then added softly as if delivering a verdict, "You've earned more than this." Her hands moved to the back of the cart, gripping the bar beside his. For a moment he didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her as if trying to decide whether to push back or let the moment happen. Then with a quiet grunt of resignation, or maybe relief, he shifted his weight and started walking. Side by side, they pushed the carts forward, steel grinding on concrete, sweat on both their brows, and silence between them that said more than words ever could. Across the lot, people paused. A woman in her mid-40s carrying a toddler stopped mid-step. A man with a shopping bag tilted his head, confused. A teenager raised his phone halfway, then slowly lowered it, because what they saw didn't compute. A well-dressed black woman in a navy suit and leather heels, clearly someone important, was pushing carts beside an old man who looked like he belonged in a VA hospital, not a discount store parking lot. Together, they moved like clockwork. He adjusted the line. She stabilized the front. He cleared the wheels. She guided the row. There was no showmanship, no explanations. Just two people doing a task that should never have required both of them, but somehow in that moment did. The sun glared overhead, baking the pavement in waves of heat. Jasmine's blouse clung to her back, her curls tight against her temples. Walt's breathing was heavier now, but steadier. With every step, his posture straightened a little, as if the presence beside him wasn't lifting the carts, but lifting the shame. Not a word passed between them for several minutes. They didn't need to speak. This was communication through movement, through dignity shared and restored. Finally, as they neared the last row, Walt broke the silence, not with gratitude, but a question. "What made you stop?" His voice was quieter now, laced with something dangerously close to hope. Jasmine didn't answer right away. She stepped back, brushing dust off her hands, and looked out over the parking lot, at the people watching, pretending not to. "Because I've sat in too many rooms," she said, "where men like you are statistics, file numbers, footnotes and reports nobody reads." She turned back to him. "Today you weren't invisible." The last cart clicked into place, but Jasmine knew the job wasn't finished. Not the real one. The rusted metal had been cleared, yes. But what this man carried inside him, that weight hadn't budged an inch, and she wasn't about to let it stay buried. She motioned toward a flimsy table set up outside the store, a half-shaded corner barely protected from the rising Texas sun, with two white plastic chairs and a vending machine humming behind them like background static. A hand-painted sign above the kiosk read, "Coffee, 99 cents, no refills." Walt followed her eyes but didn't move. He stood still, hands at his sides, like a soldier waiting on an order he wasn't sure he could accept. Jasmine turned to him, voice calm but commanding. "Come sit with me. 5 minutes. I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for the truth." That word, truth, did something. Walt gave the smallest of nods. They walked side by side, slow and deliberate, like every step required both permission and purpose. She ordered 2 coffees, black, no sugar, no cream. Something about the moment didn't allow for sweetness. When she handed him the cup, he cradled it with both hands like it was fragile. Like warmth itself was a luxury. Walt didn't speak right away. He didn't look at her. His eyes followed the shimmer of heat over the parking lot, as if watching ghosts pace the asphalt. Jasmine waited. She didn't prod. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Finally, with the kind of steady breath a man takes before telling something he hasn't said aloud in years, he began. 1943, Georgia, airfield no one remembers now. I built bombers, B-17S. Fortresses, they called them. Big, ugly, loud sons of steel. He paused, sipped the coffee. I was 19. They wouldn't let me fly them. Didn't matter how good I was. The sky belonged to someone else back then. But I knew every inch of those planes. I could build one blindfolded. His voice was steady, almost mechanical, like he was reciting from a manual written in muscle memory. The pilots got the parades. We got the calluses. He chuckled once. Funny thing, huh? Jasmine said nothing. She let the words sit between them, watched them settle like dust on the table. Walt continued, voice quieter now. Had a son, Joey, good boy. Didn't talk much. Went to war 'cause he thought he should. Gulf, 91. The coffee trembled slightly in his grip. Stepped on something that wasn't supposed to be there. Closed casket. Government sent me a flag, a check, and 3, we thank yous. His eyes glazed over, not with tears, but with something harder. Detachment. I buried him on a Wednesday. Elaine sat in the front row and never spoke again for 3 days. After that, she started forgetting things. Not big things, little things. Milk in the pantry. Locking the door twice. Her sister's name. He cleared his throat. By the time we noticed, the forgetting had already made a home in her, and now it's the only tenant left. Jasmine's grip on her coffee tightened. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but it stayed lodged, because she knew the story wasn't rare. But this telling of it, this precise, stripped-down version from a man who had nothing left to prove, it hit different. Walt stared at the plastic table. Every morning I make her tea. She don't drink it, just holds the mug, like she remembers it used to matter. I show her the wedding photo, us in black and white, grinning like fools. Some mornings she asks me who that man is next to her. His voice cracked. Not a break, just a tremor. But here's the thing. Even when she forgets everything else, where she is, who she is, even her own name, she never forgets me. He looked up, finally meeting Jasmine's eyes. Never once. Time stopped. The parking lot noise faded. The beeping carts, the passing traffic, even the hum of the vending machine behind them. Jasmine stared at him, stunned. Not because she didn't believe him, but because the depth of it, the sheer staggering beauty of that loyalty, broke something open in her. She had witnessed institutional cruelty, had dissected policy failures line by line. But this wasn't about systems anymore. This was about one man, one woman, and a love too stubborn to die even when the mind did. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing clever to say, nothing political. Just the simple truth. Some things aren't supposed to fade. Walt leaned back slightly in the chair, exhaling. You asked for truth. That's mine. Jasmine set her cup down gently, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not just truth. That's honor. Walt's final words had pierced something deeper than Jasmine expected. They hadn't just lingered. They detonated, echoing louder with every mile she drove home. This wasn't compassion anymore. It was war. Jasmine tossed her keys onto the granite counter and didn't even take off her coat. The silence of her townhouse pressed in on her, broken only by the soft mechanical hum of the refrigerator and the sharp click of her heels across the hardwood floor. She didn't sit. She moved directly to her desk, shoving aside unopened mail, flipping open her laptop with the urgency of someone disarming a bomb. Her fingers flew across the keys, not emotional, surgical. She wasn't searching for comfort. She was searching for truth, the kind that lives in outdated PDFs, broken links, and archive files no one ever expects a congresswoman to touch. She wasn't using staff. Not this time. This wasn't for a hearing. This wasn't for a headline. This was personal. She entered the Department of Veterans Affairs database using her official clearance, bypassing the external user portal with a code she hadn't used in months. She typed the name, Walter Harold Shepard. It came back with an immediate match. Born 1929, enlisted 1943, honorably discharged. 3 commendations, no pension, no medical assistance, no disability service in over 30 years. A chill ran down her spine as she drilled deeper into the file. Years of rejection notices, request return for minor technicalities, and then the line that stopped her breath mid-exhale. Claim inactive. Reason, lacked final administrative authorization. 1989, 1 signature. That's all. A single signature, probably from a desk clerk long dead or long retired, had sealed this man's fate. One line left blank on one form had sentenced Walt Shepard to live the rest of his life carrying a dying woman on his shoulders, while corporate children barked orders at him in parking lots. Jasmine's pulse surged like gunfire. She opened another browser, this time for Texas's public health assistance portal. She accessed Elaine Shepard's Medicaid status. It was worse than she feared. Pending verification, level 3, status unresolved since April 2013. 10 years. 10 years of sitting in limbo while oxygen tanks were rationed like luxury items. Jasmine stood abruptly, knocking over her chair without even noticing. Her breath came in short, clipped bursts, not panic, but fury compressed into discipline. She paced the room once, twice, then grabbed her phone off the desk like it had personally wronged her. She didn't hesitate. It was already past midnight, but she hit the direct line for her chief legislative aide. On the third ring, a groggy voice answered, "Congresswoman?" Jasmine's voice was ice over fire. "Clear my morning. I want the Texas VA regional director either in my office or on video call by 10. And I want the district manager of that grocery chain, whoever supervises the store in Southampton, seated across from me by 11:30. There was a pause on the line. Then, "Yes, ma'am, should I ask for—" Jasmine cut her off. "Don't ask. Tell them. If they don't show, we issue subpoenas and make it national. We're not playing games." She ended the call before a reply could come. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the glowing laptop screen. The open file blinked back at her like a wound that refused to scab. 34 years of silence, 3 wars, 2 presidencies, and not a single soul had bothered to double-check a missing signature. No appeal, no call, no one noticed. Except now. She had, and that changed everything. Jasmine leaned down slowly and righted her chair, the legs scraping like metal across bone. She sat, pulled the file back to the top, and whispered, not to herself, but to the system that had failed him. "You left a good man behind. I'm not leaving him there." By the time dawn broke over Dallas, Jasmine Crockett wasn't fueled by caffeine or duty anymore. She was fueled by a promise she hadn't spoken aloud, but had etched into every breath since reading that file. No more forgotten soldiers, not on her watch. The grocery store didn't open for another 30 minutes, but Jasmine was already inside, seated alone at a cold metal table in the employee break room, a featureless gray box that smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. She wore no badge, no political mask, just a dark blazer over yesterday's blouse, and an expression carved from sleepless conviction. The file sat in front of her, Walt's life reduced to stamped denials, photocopied forms, and silence. She didn't pace. She didn't check her phone. She waited. Precisely at 7:03 a.m., Troy Mattis entered. Store manager, mid-40s, cautious eyes, business casual nerves. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her, blinking as if unsure whether this was a meeting or a mistake. Jasmine motioned silently to the chair across from her. He sat. She didn't shake his hand. Without ceremony, she slid the manila folder across the table. He opened it and froze. Service records, VA claim summaries, internal memos, copies of employee evaluations that describe Walt as slow but reliable, fragile but punctual. At the bottom of one, may not be fit for long-term shifts, but shows up rain or shine. Jasmine leaned in. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to fix something. You're going to help me." Troy looked up, startled. She didn't wait. 18 months of salary, base pay plus benefits, paid in full, no deductions, no taxes. You'll process it as part of a new company program. Veterans of Honor, or whatever term your PR team can stomach. I'll provide the funds, privately and untraceably. His mouth opened slightly. She held up a hand. "No, you don't get to refuse. Not when your employee, a 90-year-old World War II veteran, has been lifting steel carts for minimum wage to keep his wife alive, while this company hands out loyalty cards to customers buying soda in bulk." She let the silence expand. Tense. Heavy. "You don't have a PR crisis, Mr. Mathis. You have a moral one." Troy swallowed. "Even if I agree, what do I tell him? He'll know it didn't come from us. Walt's too proud to accept a handout." Jasmine's voice lowered, sharper now, like a scalpel poised above a nerve. "That's why it won't be a handout. It'll be a recognition. From a company he's served loyally for years. A thank you that should have come decades ago. And if you tell him otherwise, if you so much as hint that this came from outside, I will drag this entire chain into a congressional spotlight so hot your CEO will be testifying under oath by Friday." Her words didn't rise in volume. They didn't need to. Each one landed like a verdict. She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and opened an email she had drafted at 4:17 a.m. It was addressed to the Deputy Director of Texas Health and Human Services and the Regional Case Manager for Delayed Medicaid Processing. Attached, Elaine Shepard's stalled case file, Jasmine's legal memorandum outlining statutory violations, and a 48-hour compliance demand. "This is already in motion," she said, voice flat. "By tomorrow night, his wife's medical support will be approved and retroactively processed. No denials, no loops, no calls back, just action." Troy looked at the folder again, then at her. "You're not doing this as a congresswoman, are you?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Jasmine's stare never wavered. "No," she said. "I'm doing this as a human being who's tired of waiting for institutions to do what's right." She stood, collected her phone, and slipped the folder back into her bag. "You'll contact your district supervisor. You'll prepare the paperwork. And when you tell Walt, because someone has to, you'll tell him this was long overdue and that he earned every damn penny." As she turned to leave, she paused in the doorway, just long enough to twist the knife of reality one last time. "You should be ashamed it took a stranger to make you see him." Then she was gone, leaving behind the smell of cold coffee, burning shame, and a file that weighed more than any paycheck ever could. The gears had been set in motion behind closed doors, but Walt Shepard knew nothing of it. To him, it was just another day, another battle fought quietly beneath the weight of sweat, steel, and silence, until the voice on the intercom called his name. "Mr. Shepard, please report to the manager's office." The announcement crackled through the store's intercom with all the warmth of a broken promise. Walt paused, his hands wrapped around the cold steel of a crooked shopping cart, and turned his head slightly. His knees ached. His back screamed. But that voice, it unsettled something deeper, an instinct honed from years of knowing that when authority calls, it's rarely for anything good. He didn't hurry. He never did. The world moved fast enough without his help. Slowly, methodically, he steered the final row of carts into the corral, wiped his brow with the frayed cuff of his sleeve, and limped toward the building that had paid him in hours, not dignity. The office was a sterile, windowless room with cheap carpet and a lingering smell of printer ink and burnt coffee. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like judgment. Walt entered quietly, his cap in his hands, posture instinctively straightened, not out of pride, but out of a reflex that had kept him alive longer than most men his age. The manager, Troy Mathis, stood behind the desk, normally brash, rushed, indifferent, but today something in him looked hollowed out. He held a thick white envelope with both hands like it was fragile or sacred, or radioactive. Troy cleared his throat, not a cough, not a stall, a ritual, like he needed to summon the right voice to match what he'd been ordered to say. "Mr. Shepard," he began, his tone shaky with something that sounded a lot like guilt. "It's an honor to inform you that you've been selected as the inaugural recipient of our new company program. It's called the Veterans of Honor Initiative. You're the first." He extended the envelope like it was a medal being pinned on a ghost. Walt didn't take it immediately. His eyes narrowed. Not suspicious, just tired of surprises. He reached for the envelope slowly, as if expecting it to disappear before his fingers touched it. His hands shook, not from emotion but from 70 years of labor that had never once led to something like this. He opened it right there. The first thing he saw was the header, "Authorized leave, full benefits." Below that, a breakdown. 12 months of paid time off, uninterrupted, guaranteed. His current salary preserved. No strings, no reduction in hours. Then a second document, shorter, colder, but far more devastating in its simplicity. It was from the health insurer. Elaine Shepard, his wife of nearly 70 years, was approved for full long-term coverage. Prescriptions, oxygen support, home equipment, all backdated to the day the first denial had arrived nearly a decade ago. Walt didn't blink. He just stared. The paper didn't tremble in his hands. The rest of the world did. His breathing slowed, his lips parting slightly, as if the weight of what he was holding was pressing against his chest. He looked down at the signature line. There was no familiar name, no hint of who had orchestrated this, no politician's stamp, no flashy logos, just authorization, quiet, final, done. He looked up slowly, his voice dry and rasped from too many winters spent without enough heat. "Why?" he asked. Not defiant, not demanding. Just why? His eyes searched the manager's face, Not for gratitude, but for explanation. Some thread of logic that could tie this moment to the decades that preceded it. Why me? He asked again. Why now? Troy opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? That a woman had walked in from another world and lit a fire under the entire system? That none of this was the store's doing? That the company had been given a chance to look righteous and barely had the decency to say yes? So he said nothing, and that was the most honest thing he could have done. Walt looked back down at the papers. He read them again, slower this time, like he was memorizing a language he hadn't dared to speak in years. Relief didn't hit him like a wave. It came like a slow thaw, painfully gradual, as if his body wasn't sure it was allowed to feel it yet. No one clapped. No one cried. There were no cameras. Just a man in a beige room holding a letter that told him, for the first time in nearly 4 decades, "You can rest now." He folded the documents carefully, precisely, as if they were a flag. He slid them back into the envelope, holding it like something sacred. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with a small nod that barely tilted his chin, he whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't for Troy. It wasn't for the system. It was for the moment, for the silence, for the absence of humiliation. And he turned slowly and walked out, cap in hand, envelope to chest, the weight on his shoulders just a little lighter than when he walked in. And no, he never asked again who was behind it, because he didn't need to. Some mercies are better left unexplained. He didn't sleep much that night. The envelope stayed on the nightstand, unopened again, but not forgotten, like a second heartbeat in the dark. For once, Walt wasn't bracing for the next hit. He was holding still, just to see what it might feel like if life finally let up. The morning sunlight slid through the half-closed blinds like fingers on a piano. Gentle, warm, almost apologetic. The house smelled faintly of toast, but Walt hadn't made breakfast yet. He was sitting beside Elaine's bed, as he always did, one hand on hers, the other resting on his lap. Her breathing was steady, eyes closed, the oxygen machine letting out its slow, mechanical rhythm, like the background hum of survival. She hadn't spoken in 3 days. Not really. Just the usual drifting stares, the occasional half-formed syllable. Her mind had been a ghost town for months now, visited only by fragments. Familiar music, the sound of the rain, the brush of his voice. But then, like a match struck in a dark room, her eyes opened. Focused, not vague, not confused. Focused. Her lips parted dry and cracked, and she squinted at him. Her voice came out like a memory finding its way through cobwebs. "Walt, you're still wearing that old thing?" He froze. Air caught in his lungs. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. He looked down at his flannel shirt, blue plaid, faded at the elbows. The same one he'd worn for years. The same one she used to say made him look like a man who chopped wood and danced anyway. Elaine blinked again, a hint of a smirk rising at the corner of her mouth. "You really should let that thing retire." Walt's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but only managed a rasp. "You remember?" She frowned, almost insulted. "Of course I remember. It's Tuesday, right?" It was Saturday. But that didn't matter. For a moment, he just stared at her, memorizing everything. The curve of her cheek, the way her fingers twitched slightly against the sheet. Her eyes suddenly clear like the clouds had pulled back just for him. This wasn't lucidity. It was resurrection. A window had opened inside her, and for reasons no doctor could explain, time had stepped aside. He stood up, moving slowly, carefully. If he blinked, the moment might vanish. He crossed the room and opened the old cherrywood cabinet. Inside, a dusty turntable, a stack of warped vinyl records, and one sleeve more worn than the rest. He pulled it out like it was holy scripture. On the label, Unchained Melody, The Righteous Brothers, their wedding song. He placed the record on the player, the needle trembling slightly as it lowered. The static came first. Then that first long, aching note like a sigh pulled from the soul. Walt turned and she was watching him. Not some hazy version of him. Him. She saw him. He walked to her slowly, knees burning, breath tight. He offered his hand. She took it. He lifted her gently from the bed into the wheelchair, every motion deliberate. He adjusted the blanket over her lap, then crouched in front of her, placing one hand behind her back and the other under her palm. And as the music filled the room, they began to move, not dancing in the traditional sense, but something far more intimate, a slow, swaying communion. His hand guided the chair in soft arcs. Her fingers tightened around his like they once had under chandeliers and candlelight. The world shrank to four wheels and one melody. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't let go. For a few minutes they were 23 again, her dress spinning, his shoes scuffed from the nervous shuffle of first dances. He whispered to her, not words but fragments, inside jokes, vows, the names of places they used to dream about. "Remember Niagara?" he murmured. She nodded faintly. "We said we'd go back." "We still can," she whispered. She couldn't. They both knew it. But he didn't correct her. That wasn't the point. The song ended, but neither of them moved. He stayed there, crouched beside her, forehead resting lightly against hers. The record spun into silence, needle circling the center in soft, static loops. He kissed her temple and whispered something he hadn't said in years. Not because he didn't feel it, but because it always hurt too much. "I missed you." She closed her eyes and replied, soft as breath. "I never left." That was when he knew. She'd go again. Maybe in an hour, maybe in minutes. The window would close, the fog would return. But for now, he had her. He rolled her back toward the window, sunlight warming her face. They sat there for a long time, saying little. Just being. Existing together in the full weight of clarity that had come like a lightning strike. Brief, blinding, undeserved. Walt looked at her, her eyes half closed. The corners of her mouth lifted ever so slightly, and in his mind the words came, not as desperation, but as truth. "I don't need a miracle. I just need one more day like this." Just one more day where she saw him, where her hands knew his name, where the world for one fleeting hour gave back what it had taken. And for that day, he was grateful. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The music faded. Elaine had fallen asleep again, the kind of sleep that felt like both mercy and a countdown. Walt sat beside her, fingers interlocked with hers, eyes fixed on nothing. He didn't need more time. He needed meaning, some trace that what they lived had mattered. And then came the knock. It was barely audible. Just two taps on the screen door, soft enough to be mistaken for wind. Walt didn't rise at first. He thought maybe he imagined it. But when it came again, sharp, brief, unmistakably intentional, he pushed himself to his feet. His knees groaned in protest, but the ache reminded him he was still here, still standing, still capable. The front door creaked as he opened it. No one stood there. No visitor, no speech, no parade. Just a small white envelope tucked between the slats of the storm door, catching the early sun like a message dropped by the universe itself. He looked up and down the porch. Empty street. The breeze moved through the sycamore leaves with a hush that sounded almost reverent. He picked up the envelope. No return address, no markings. Inside, a folded note, handwritten in dark blue ink, the kind only used when someone slows down enough to mean every word. "Mr. Walt, this isn't charity. It's a thank you. This country doesn't know how to say it, but it owes you more than back pay or folded flags. You didn't need rescuing. You needed remembering. You didn't ask for help. You asked to be seen. You worked through silence, fought through indifference, and still kept decency alive in a place where most gave it up for convenience. Thank you for not breaking, for not hardening, for holding the line. The world doesn't need louder men. It needs truer ones. You've done more than serve. You've reminded the rest of us what service really means. Just someone passing by." Walt read it once, twice, then again, slower. His hand trembled, not from fragility, but from the sheer weight of being seen, not as a statistic, not as a sob story, but as something sacred. The note wasn't signed. The handwriting was clean but plain, like someone practiced humility in every sentence. Whoever wrote it knew him, not by name, but by truth. He stepped back into the house, closed the door behind him gently, and walked to the kitchen table with the note held like a relic. He pulled out his old brown leather wallet, the same one Elaine gave him in 1983 on his birthday, the edges worn, the stitching frayed. He opened the wallet and slid the letter inside, next to the only other thing he kept in there, a faded photo of them at Coney Island, 1956. Wynn in her scarf, him in his navy whites, both of them squinting into the sun with no idea what was coming. He sat at the table, the note pressing lightly against his chest from the inside pocket. There were no medals on the walls, no plaques, no headlines. But that piece of paper, that was worth more than every folded flag he'd ever watched get handed to another broken family. It was proof. Proof that someone had been watching, that someone cared enough to write, to reach out, to say the thing the country never had the courage to. You didn't fail. We did. That night he didn't tell Elaine about the note. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing softer now, like the machine had finally learned to follow her rhythm. But as he sat beside her in the quiet, one hand over hers, the other pressed to his chest, he whispered something not meant for her, but for the world beyond their window. I wasn't looking for a legacy, just a witness. And somewhere out there, in some anonymous mailbox or coffee shop or broken hallway, that witness had spoken. The next morning, Walt rose before dawn. He shaved carefully, put on a clean shirt, and tucked the wallet into his chest pocket, not out of habit, but reverence. As he walked toward the door, the sunlight breaking slowly across the horizon, he looked down at Elaine, still sleeping, still here. He leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back soon. Just gonna push some carts for the air." Because some routines are more than work. They're memory, they're defiance. They're how old men like Walt Shepard remind the world, you can forget the paperwork, you can bury the heroism, but you can't erase a man who kept showing up when no one else did. He'd been seen, heard, acknowledged. And for the first time in decades, Walt Shepard felt like more than a shadow walking in daylight. But time, even when softened by grace, never pauses for long. And its final knock came, as gently as a sigh, 3 months later. It was early fall when Elaine passed. The leaves had just begun to turn in Dallas, drifting like soft gold confetti across the sidewalks she used to sweep when she still had strength in her hands. She went quietly, no gasping, no struggle, just a stillness that deepened with each breath until breath itself no longer came. Walt was there, sitting beside her, as he had every morning and every night. His fingers curled around hers, his thumb tracing the back of her hand in a slow rhythm, as if willing her soul to stay anchored a moment longer. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them was thick with memory, of dances once danced, meals shared without words, and 1,000 small kindnesses the world had never seen. When the final breath came, he felt it, not in sound, but in absence, like a chord that should have played but never did. He didn't cry, not right away. He just held her hand a little tighter, kissed her knuckles, and whispered something that never made it past his lips. Then he sat there for hours, just him, her, and the fading light through the bedroom blinds. The war was finally over, and somehow he'd survived again. The funeral was modest, just a few neighbors, a veteran chaplain, and a handful of workers from the grocery store who had come to know the story by now. Jasmine Crockett sent flowers, but no press release, no statement, just a simple card. Her strength still walks beside you. He folded it carefully and placed it next to Elaine's wedding ring, which he now wore on a chain beneath his shirt. 3 weeks passed, then 4. The house grew quieter, not lonely but sacred. Every chair, every cup, every sound held the echo of her. And yet Walt didn't collapse, didn't fade. He did what he had always done. He rose early, shaved clean, and put on his flannel shirt. But now, instead of walking to the store with tired steps and aching joints, he walked with something deeper, intent. He no longer worked there. His last shift had ended the day he danced in the kitchen. But still, every morning at 7:15 sharp, he walked through the sliding doors of that grocery store, past the produce section and the carts he used to wrangle, and stood near the break room just long enough to catch the change of shifts. "Good morning," he'd say. That's all. No speeches, no sermons, just two words, steady and warm, from a man who had lived long enough to mean them. At first, the younger employees were awkward, unsure, but soon they came to expect it, to need it, to depend on it. Walt didn't just greet them, he saw them. When one cashier broke down after a double shift, Walt just nodded and handed her a water bottle. When a teenage bagger admitted he didn't think he'd live past 25, Walt chuckled and said, "Son, I didn't think I'd live past Normandy." Then he patted his shoulder and added, "But here we are." And slowly they started coming to him. Not for groceries, for guidance. One afternoon, a young man in a hoodie approached him near the magazine rack, hands shaking slightly. "You don't know me," he said, "but I heard your story. I watched that clip online, and I was about to give up. Like, really give up." He swallowed hard, eyes glossy. "But then I saw how you just kept showing up. For her, for yourself, and I thought, maybe I could try again." Walt didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just put a hand on the kid's shoulder and said, "Then start by showing up tomorrow." That's how we all begin again. Others came too. A young mother who hadn't spoken to her estranged father in years. A cashier trying to go back to school after dropping out. A janitor who carried poems in his pocket but never read them aloud, until Walt asked him to. They called him Mr. Walt now. Not just Sir, not that old guy who used to push carts, but Mr. Walter, like he was part of the store's foundation, a living compass, a quiet storm of grace in human form. And though his steps grew slower, his eyes dimmer, his presence only grew stronger. He didn't preach, he didn't lecture, he just came back, every day, said hello, listened, and reminded a fractured world that dignity isn't measured by title or age, but by how gently one man can steady another in a moment of doubt. Elaine was gone, but her light lingered, in Walt's quiet smile, in the way he folded receipts like letters, in the rhythm of his walk through those automatic doors, still greeting the sunrise with purpose. And each time someone thanked him, told him they'd change course because of him, Walt would nod and whisper the same reply under his breath. More prayer than answer. She'd be glad to know we're still dancing. The world had changed around Walt Shepard, not through legislation or headlines, but through the slow ripple of one act of humanity multiplied by 1,000 hearts. His quiet defiance against time had become something larger than him, and eventually the camera lights came calling. But the woman at the center of it all never once stepped forward to take credit. It happened on a Sunday morning broadcast, one of those nationally syndicated news segments that usually traffic in political sparring and surface-level hero worship. But that day the final segment shifted. A black and white photo of Walt pushing carts filled the screen, followed by silent footage of him dancing with Elaine in her wheelchair, grainy and beautiful, like a dream on VHS. The anchor's voice softened, slowing from its usual brisk cadence. He turned toward the guest in the studio chair beside him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't dressed for a photo op, no bright lapel pins, no party-colored blazer, just muted tones, a loose ponytail, and eyes that looked like they'd been up reading case files all night. The anchor leaned in, as anchors do when they smell sentiment. "You've become a bit of a folk hero in this story, Congresswoman, quietly funding Walt's recovery, advocating for his healthcare records, even building a program around it. Why didn't you speak out sooner?" Jasmine didn't answer right away, her fingers laced in her lap, eyes flicking for a brief second to the camera, then back to the host. Not as a politician, but as someone calculating the weight of truth in public spaces. Then she smiled, a real smile, the kind that didn't ask for applause. "I didn't help Mr. Shepard," she said, her voice calm, firm, unblinking. "I just fixed something we should have fixed a long time ago." The studio went still, not silent, but still, as if every producer, every audience member, every technician behind the glass had suddenly realized this wasn't a headline. It was a reckoning. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees. "There are thousands of Walts, men and women who gave more than they were ever paid for, who sacrificed time, bodies, memories, and then came home to a system that forgot their names but remembered their paperwork errors. The anchor, trying to recover the rhythm, said, "But surely what you did—" "What I did," she interrupted gently, "was undo 3 decades of silence with a phone call and a letter. That's not a miracle. That's a correction." Her words cut sharper than outrage. They didn't beg sympathy. They exposed complicity. The segment played across the country like a match over gasoline. Clips flooded social media. Pundits tried to spin it, package it, politicize it. But the truth had already outrun the commentary. It wasn't about ideology. It wasn't even about policy. It was about the collective shame of realizing a 90-year-old man had to push carts to keep the woman he loved breathing, while the country that trained him to fight had left him to fade. In backyards, living rooms, diners, and barbershops, Americans of all backgrounds saw something in Jasmine's words. Not just righteousness, but clarity. Because the truth was this: she hadn't offered Walt charity. She had restored his dignity without asking for the spotlight. And that terrified some people. In Washington, reporters asked her if she turned the story into a bill. Lobbyists offered to name wings of hospitals after her. One talk show begged her to host a special on restoring the soul of America. She declined every offer. At a community event 2 weeks later, someone asked her again during a Q&A, "Why no victory lap? Why no parade?" She adjusted the mic and said simply, "You don't hang medals on people for putting out fires they helped build." The crowd went quiet, then slowly erupted into applause. Not the polite political kind, the real kind. The kind that starts in chests, not hands. Behind the scenes, she kept going. The Veterans Honor Program she created was expanded quietly. No press release, no branding. Just names and numbers processed faster. Records reopened. Cases reviewed. Phone calls returned. She started sending handwritten notes to families who'd waited decades for answers, most ending the same way. "This isn't justice. It's just a beginning." She didn't call herself a crusader. She didn't run on it in speeches. She didn't even tell her staff everything, because Jasmine Crockett hadn't stepped into Walt Shepard's world to become a savior. She'd stepped in because she saw a crack in the floor, and when the world ignored it, she bent down and filled it with her own hands. Back in Dallas, Walt never saw the broadcast. He wasn't one for TV, but someone told him about the interview, and he just nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "She said that?" he asked. "Yeah, almost word for word." Walt looked out the window, then down at his hands, gnarled and spotted but still steady. "She's wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "I think she did save me. She just didn't want the credit." Then he stood, stretched his back, and reached for his flannel. "Now, if you'll excuse me, it's nearly 7:15. I've got some good mornings to give." Because sometimes the most heroic acts leave no signature, only the quiet, rippling proof that someone, somewhere, still remembers how to do the right thing and never asked for thanks. As the final echoes of Jasmine's words faded from the airwaves and Walt's footsteps returned each morning to that humble store not out of necessity, but out of quiet defiance, one truth lingered, an unspoken thunder rolling beneath every act, every silence, every cart pushed through indifference. This wasn't just one man's redemption. It was a mirror held to us all. America is full of Walt Shepards, men who built its bones but now sleep beneath leaky roofs, women who kept its engines running but can't afford the medicine that keeps them breathing. They are not statistics. They are not background. They are the story. But we only look when the tragedy becomes cinematic enough to cut through our apathy. Walt didn't need a savior. He needed the country he bled for to remember him. And Jasmine Crockett didn't lift him up to be praised. She lifted the curtain on a truth we've refused to face. We honor veterans with parades, but not with policies. We thank them with slogans, but forget them in line at the pharmacy. We live in a world where a man who once riveted B-17 bombers for World War II now has to fold his knees against arthritis just to earn enough to pay for his wife's oxygen tank. That is not fate. That is design, and that design is broken. But here's the human lesson buried beneath the rust of bureaucracy and the noise of broadcast interviews. Dignity doesn't retire. It doesn't fade with age or vanish with relevance. It persists, quietly, fiercely. Like Walt, who showed up with aching legs and trembling hands not to ask for help, but to give the last drops of his strength for love. And love, that relentless, stubborn force, is the second lesson. Walt didn't push carts for attention. He pushed them for Elaine, for the memory of dances once shared, for the chance to give her one more hour of lucidity. And in that sacrifice, we saw something rare. The kind of love this world has forgotten how to name. A love not made of grand gestures, but of early mornings, small wages, and calloused hands that keep going. Even when no one is watching. Jasmine saw it, and she didn't just respond. She refused to let that love go unseen any longer. The injustice here wasn't just Walt being overworked. It was systemic neglect wearing a polite face. It was the quiet cruelty of forms lost in filing cabinets and eligibility denied because a single signature from 1989 was missing. That is how we dehumanize our elders, not with guns, but with red tape. And when no one pushes back, that red tape tightens like a noose. Jasmine didn't tear down the system. She exploited its blind spots to rewrite its conclusion. And that's the next lesson. Power means nothing if you don't bend it toward mercy. Being in a position to help isn't the same as choosing to. What she did wasn't charity, it was reparation. An unspoken apology that took the form of a paycheck, a healthcare revision, and a moment of dignity wrapped in the illusion of recognition. And yet she never once claimed the spotlight. So what are we left with? Not just a touching story, not just a tear in the eye of a TV audience. We're left with a call, a whisper in the back of the mind that says, if the system won't honor people like Walt, then maybe we have to. Maybe it starts with looking at the man behind the cart. Maybe it means asking our own parents what they've stopped asking for because no one ever said yes. Maybe it means electing people like Jasmine not because they're perfect, but because they refuse to let decency become extinct. We keep waiting for heroes, but the truth is, most of them look like Walt, bent, bruised, forgotten, and still showing up. We keep dreaming of revolutions, but the truth is they look like Jasmine, walking quietly into a grocery store, saying nothing, and changing a man's life without ever needing her name etched on a wall. This story teaches us that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like a whisper in a parking lot. Sometimes it feels like a hand on your back when the world says, you're done. Sometimes it looks like a woman in heels pushing carts with a 90-year-old man while everyone else stares. It reminds us that fixing the world doesn't require grand gestures, just one person paying attention when no one else does. And above all, it warns us. If we keep ignoring the people who carry this nation forward, one day we'll wake up and realize we've let the soul of the country die quietly, just like we let them. But we haven't lost it yet. Not while people like Walt still walk through those automatic doors. Not while people like Jasmine still choose action over applause. Not while any of us still have the courage to say, this isn't right, and I can help fix it. We can let this story settle quietly into our hearts, a warm moment of humanity in a cold world. Or we can carry it forward like a torch. Because if stories like Walt Shepard's leave us only feeling good, but not doing good, then we've missed the entire point. Right now, at this very moment, there's another Walt, maybe 2 blocks away, maybe 3 towns over, maybe sitting in silence across from you at a diner, folding a napkin in tired hands, wondering how to choose between heart pills and rent. He's not asking for charity. He's asking for remembrance. He's asking for a country to mean what it said in all its pledges, all its parades, all its promises. He's asking whether the flag he saluted still recognizes him as one of its own. So this is the moment where you stop being an observer. This is the moment you choose whether this story ends in your chest or ignites something in your hands. We are not helpless. We are not waiting for approval. Every system is built from individual actions. Every broken policy was once a decision made by someone just like you, with a pen in their hand and silence on their conscience. Call your local VA and ask how many veterans are still waiting for medical review. Volunteer at shelters where elders are sleeping next to veterans' medals they can't eat. Support legislation that forces transparency in state-run medical facilities. Demand timelines for care. Demand dignity as a default, not a gift. And if nothing else, look people in the eye again. The grocery clerks, the janitors, the old men pushing carts while teenagers look past them. Say thank you, not out of habit but out of awareness. Because the only difference between Walt Shepard and the man behind your local pharmacy counter could be one forgotten form, one missed email, one nation too busy scrolling to notice its greatest citizens dying quietly beneath fluorescent lights. And if you're someone with power, whether in office, business, or media, use it, not to broadcast your compassion, but to build with it. Create programs that function before the camera rolls. Establish budgets that include the voiceless. Listen harder than you speak. And when someone like Jasmine Crockett shows the way, don't ask, is this good politics? Ask, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? Don't tell yourself this was a rare case, that it was special, that it was just a fluke act of generosity, because it wasn't. It was a failure corrected, not a miracle performed. The miracle will be when this stops being rare, when veterans don't have to rely on the compassion of a passing stranger to survive another week. Let this story be your warning and your permission, a warning that silence has a cost, that looking away is not neutral, it is violent in slow motion, and permission to believe again in action, in decency, in the kind of patriotism that doesn't wave a flag, but shows up at 6:30 a.m. to help a man push carts in the heat. Jasmine Crockett didn't ask if it would make her popular. She didn't wait for legislation. She didn't check if it aligned with polling data. She saw injustice, and she moved. That's not just leadership. That's citizenship at its highest level. You have that same power, maybe not in Congress, but in the lane you're already walking, in your home, your neighborhood, your company, your church. Every day you're handed 100 chances to either walk past someone like Walt or stand still beside them. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.